Hello aspirants, welcome back to the daily news analysis of the Hindu. This is a free initiative brought to you by Transform IAS Academy. In this particular video session, we shall be looking into the articles which shall be extremely important for the civil service exam perspective for the prelims and mains in detail. So let us begin with our discussion for today. So on the front page, this coverage is very small in nature. So this is a news which had actually made alarms back in 6 years in let's say in 2012, where an Indian national was actually being taken to custody in the Pakistan. So this was purely as this person had actually crossed the border with respect to meeting a woman in the northwest of the country, where he had actually befriended on the social media. So this was back in 2012. It was the biggest news as a militant had actually crossed the border to meet a friend who he had actually met in the social media, and they also assumed it to be a trap. So that is on this particular coverage, as now is being returned back to India. So that's it. So nothing more about it. And then comes with page 6, where the NGT wraps the ministry over the groundwater notification. So we know that on December 12 there was a notification which was being issued by the Ministry of Water Resources, where there was a concept of water conservation fee. For any person who would be using the groundwater, they have to pay with the fees to what the conservation fee is all about. So on lamlet of it, now the NGT has been wrapping the ministry over the notification to what had issued back in December 2012. So here the water resources over the notification pertaining to the groundwater extraction. Now the NGT chairperson Justice Adarsh Kumar Goyal is actually been asking on what basis this particular kind of a notice was been issued, and he was stating that it was against the national interest. To whatever the water conservation fee or the notification has been issued by the ministry was against the national interest. And you should also remember that when we also discussed on the no objection certificate, where they have to get it from the government. So here the industries, whoever are extracting the groundwater and use of the water for the same package of drinking water, they would actually need to apply for a NBC, right? That is a no objection certificate, that is NOC, sorry, from the government. So however, the agriculture sector was also exempted, and we know that agriculture sector is the hugest usage of the water resources. So yes, it has also been exempted. So these were the things like what had happened back in December 12th when the ministry came up with a water conservation fee. So this is like informing the fees which is also been introduced now. It should be revised with the proper guidelines, and this water conservation fee would be payable with respect to the categories. So it also, we also discussed that the categories of the area, the type of the industry, and also the amount of the water what they're going to extract. Based on that is what the amount would be actually paid in terms of the fee, where here the main area to why they have been done this is because of the over exploitation in the areas, and also with the low to high water consuming industries, as well as with increasing quantum of the groundwater extraction. Since the exploitation is becoming more, now this kind of a fee would get a proper disciplinary curve. But here what the NGT is stating is that imposing a cost would not only help to curb the groundwater extraction, that would not be the only way where it would actually help the groundwater extraction. And the Green Panel had asked the other parties, that is the petitioners, to put forth their suggestions and also the objections to the guidelines to what it has been given. So it is like overall it's tried to get an informations or put forth the suggestions to what has to be done. And this is like the petitioners, they wanted to file their response to the notification by Jan 2nd. So this is a deadline what the NGT has been given. By Jan 2nd, they have the other parties, they have to put forth their responses with respecting to the suggestions and the other aspects. So this is on that, basically to whatever the ministry had come up with a water conservation fee. Now the NGT has been stating that on it was something where they have actually affected the national interest, and at the same time this is where this won't be enough to curb the groundwater extraction. So the suggestions has been asked, and this has to be produced by Jan 2nd. So this is on that. And next on the page 7, you have this IAF shows its mastery in hair lift. So this is with respect to a small news coverage to what you have to know in terms of how India has been getting prepared to the disasters and other aspects. So here this is an evaluation of the airlift capability of the Indian Air Force, to what extent they would be able to have an airlift. So this is at the times of the wars and the natural disasters. So here the Western Air Command airlifted a record of nearly 463 tons of the load from the Chandigarh to airfields and dropped the zones in the Ladakh region in a single wave. So it means that if there's any disasters or any kind of a natural calamities, to what extent would the Indian Air Force, because let's say if it is a flood, then the people walking or taking the goods through the roadway would not be possible. So at that point of time is where these kinds of an airlift are actually come to an extent to a great rescue of the people. So as of now, the Indian Air Force had made a record, and it has been estimated that 463 tons of the load was been lifted by the aircraft. So this is there, and this was been accomplished with 16 fixed wing transport aircraft, which would be including the heavy lift C-17 Globemaster. Then we have the 76 and the medium lift and 32. So these were the ones that aircraft which were actually been loaded. So the other informations are very basic in nature. So that's about it, and you have the same out here in a much more briefer aspects. And one more thing is the time taken. So it's less than 6 hours for the entire operation that could included the loading of the goods, flying, and also the offloading. From the start to the end, it took almost like 6 hours. It's quite it is pretty well compared to the other kinds of mistakes to what used to happen in the past. So this is a rapid airlift capability to what is been as a quick response during any times of a wars or any natural disasters or flooding in nature. So this is there, and the loader which was being taken is called as in C-17 Globemaster, which would be nearing the Ladakh airbase. So this is that. So it means that now India has been prepared to have the activity done from the uploading to the offloading, which would be with respect to 6 hours. So that's about it. A small coverage again, and here you have the Center Drafts Child Protection Policy. So we know that this was a news which was repeatedly there with respect to Muzaffar home case, where the TISS, that the Tata Institute of Social Science, which actually gave the report to the sexual assault and also the kinds of an harassment toward the child have been undergoing in the child care institutions. On limelight of this, now the center has started drafting, and it has come up with a national child protection policy. So this is where they try to ensure the safety of the children, or some of the provisions which would be included within the purview of the child protection policy. That's a national purview, and this particular policy is being published onto the website, and it's been invited the commitments and also the comments from the stakeholders till January 4th. So whatever they have to give in terms of the comments, they can go ahead and give it. If there's any changes to be done, they would be definitely able to do the changes. And you should also remember that this particular child draft policy is a first policy which has been dedicated to the protection of the children, but till date what we had only was part of the broader national child policy 2013. But for the first time we have a policy which would be dedicated for the protection of the children, and there was numerous kinds of an investigation allegations which was being conducted by the CBI on the direction of the Supreme Court, where they had done almost an investigation for 17 shelter homes for children's, like the destitute women, beggars, senior citizens in Bihar, and almost another people. Like more than 30 girls in the shelter homes of Muzaffar in the state were being subjected to the sexual abuse. So now, as per this particular new draft, the policy would apply to all institutions and also the organizations which would be including the corporate, the media houses, the government, and also the private sector. So they have not left any of the stakeholders. All of them would be covered under the draft to whatever the policy is being prepared as of now. And apart from that, this particular recommendations that all the organization must have a code of conduct, COC. So this is purely where they wanted to head the nation to be as a zero tolerance of the child abuse and the exploitation, which this is becoming a biggest human rights violations on the children's, where they wanted to get it to a zero tolerance of the child abuse and also the exploitations. And here the institution should also be designated with a staff member, and what becomes more purposeful for the staff member is that he has to ensure the procedures wherein the place whether this is being ensured as per the protection of the children, as well as in the report to any sort of an abuse. So additionally, they should also be designated with a staff member, and that person should ensure the procedures on how this particular protection of the children is actually being undertaken. And there is also a helpline number of 1098, which is a police or a child welfare committee which would be connected to, where they would be able to have any individual who suspects of physical, sexual or emotional abuse must report to this helpline number, which is called as 1098. But the problem with this particular draft policy, children's thing whatever has been coming right now is not as good when compared to the National Child Policy 2018. So why they're saying that is because this is not talking, the latest bill draft policy is not talking about the children who are being having a kind of in special protections with respect to persons who have been affected by migrations or the communal or the sectarian violence or the children's forced into begging or inflict in the law, and also those infected with HIV and AIDS. So this is not talking about the role with respect to the state for ensuring the protection of the child's for addressing the local grievances. So these local grievances should also be addressed to a larger extent. So at that point of time, this kind of an draft protection bill would be completely helping the people, that is the children, in a larger aspect. So this is something they need to look on for. So as this is being displayed onto the website of the Ministry of the Women and Child Development, so if there's any comments and changes, they would be going ahead and doing the changes. So this is on that the role of the state should be announced more, so that they would be able to protect the children rights and address the local grievances as well. So this is just a draft child protection bill policy. Once it is being done, you get it in detail. For now, this is just a basic to what you have to know. Then moving on to page 7, which talks on the row erupts over the naming Bogibeel Bridge in Assam. So this is the India's longest, so you can see here it is India's longest rail and the road bridge. So this one is actually been due to be inaugurated by the Prime Minister of India, Mr. Narendra Modi, on the December 25th, that is on the Christmas day. So this row is actually this particular bridge is almost like 4.94 kilometer long, so which is been the Bogibeel. So now the issue with this is that actually the localites there have been demanding the name of this particular bridge to be as per their history and also with the stories to what the people have been living there. So that the demand is with respect to the bridge should be named after the Chowlong Chichuka Fa, who is actually the founded member of the Ahom kingdom in Assam. So this is as good as 600 years ago. And secondly is with respect to the Assam government's proposal with respect to the Northeast Frontier Railway, where the name of the bridge as the Birangana Sati Sadhani Setu. So here this is actually the last queen of the kingdom who actually controlled the Chhutiya community. So as of now, we have come up across two things. One is the Ahom kingdom, wherein the other one is with respect to the kingdom which has been controlled by the Chhutiya community. So they wanted the Ahoms and the Chhutiyas who actually fought for the territorial control for this particular place for more than 150 years during the medieval period. So this is a question from your medieval India where it becomes extremely important, as this is a contradiction which has been happening between the Ahom kingdom and also the Chhutiya community. So here they are stating that here there should be this particular Mr. Ahom, which has been taking over the Chhutiya domain around 1600s, which actually ended in around like 1600s, and they wanted to name this place after the kingdom which has been ruled in Assam, and this naming the bridge after the Swarga Dio, which is also the same thing which has been demanded for a long time. And they also been kinds of in communities which has been living in this particular land, they wants to constitute a greater Assamese society. So here they also the most of the youths who have been belonging to the all Assam Chhutiya students, they had also given a kind of an information that if the government or if the inauguration of the day, if they're not taking the demand of the name of their iconic, then definitely they would be jumping from the Brahmaputra river on the day of the inauguration and they would be giving up with their life. So this is India's longest rail and road bridge which is going to get inaugurated on December 25th. On sidelines of that, most of the people, the localites, are having a demand of the name to what has to be named. And secondly, this is with respect to the problems to what they have been stating, that if they are not giving the names, then definitely they would be committing the suicide, which means that they would be jumping from the Brahmaputra river on the day of the inauguration, which means that they are trying to put an halt to the name, or if they are not taking their name into consideration. And there are two indigenous community, one is the Dhuru and Mishing, which is also want the bridge to be named after their leaders. So Dhurus wants to be named as a Bimor Dhuri, wherein the Missings insist that the best name would be the Swahit Kamala Miri. So there is another two indigenous community who are again put forth their demand that this bridge should be named after this particular people. So here as of now, this particular bridge which has been set up in Assam is as of now under the issue of the naming ceremony, where each and every different groups wants to be named as per their requirements. So what is government gonna do with respect to it, what's gonna happen, we need to wait and watch about it. So this is on that. Then comes under the page 11, this is again a very small news item to what you have to know, where the Supreme Court had stated that the benefit of the doubt must go to the accused. So here the benefit of the doubt is in cases which would be actually because of the police investigation, where most of them must favor the accused irrespective of the gravity of the crime. To whatever is the crime, here the benefit of the doubt should favor the accused person, because the Supreme Court held in a recent judgment in a 17-year-old case of the murder and rioting in UP. So when the Supreme Court was actually addressing the 17-year-old case, at that point of time they had actually understood that here it is something the benefit of doubt should be given to the accused rather than any other person. So this is the latest judgment what the Supreme Court had given on libel of it. It observed that there should something to be focused in a larger extent, and the case has been discussed out here on UPSC perspective. The case doesn't find important for us, so this is all about it. If there's any new further development, we'll try to get that development back into the videos. So this is about it. Then under page 12 you have under the international, where there is a reform at 40. So this is almost like 4 decades after China's Deng Xiaoping, where the mastermind, where they actually reform and reopening up the policy. So this is the Asian giant which has become an economic superpower only behind the USA. So we know that how pretty well is China doing as of now when it comes to the economic, where it is becoming a superpower after the world, after the USA. So how was this possible? Because of the past 4 decades, whatever the reforms it has been taken. So here this 42, the country's GDP has increased 42 times from 1980 to 2017, where it has expanded 305 billion to almost like 12.7 trillion, which is a massive kind of an improvement when it comes to the country's GDP. And here there are 620, where the number of the dollars billions in China. So the most important in the world is the Shanghai, which is published in the Huron report. And you should also know that the China has been ranking the world's biggest exporter. The goods and services export of the country's economic engine were almost to be worth with respect to 2.49 trillion in 2017. The value of the Chinese export has been increased to $21 billion in 1980. And moreover, like 10.2% of the average growth rate in China's economy has been between 1980 to 2016. So by 1980 to 2016-17, it is accounting to be almost like 4 decades, which means that 40 years of the time. And $168 billion, this is a value of the foreign investment that came to China in 2017. So virtually nothing in 1980, but just in 2017 it was $168 billion. And this goes the track record with respect to the percentage of the national wealth, which has been held by 1% in 2015 from 6.4% in 1980, and the China becoming the increasingly unequal country as well. So this is showing the track record of China to what has been performed in the past 40 years. So what you can do is you can just look on to them, and basically you should understand this was been possible for China to do it with respect to the masterminded behind the reform and reopening up the policy, which actually it made the economy of the China to become a superpower as of now, and it has been 42 times comparatively back in 1980. So the key information of this would be like what is that India would actually like to take it from this. So as this plays a very important role under GS paper 2. So and also under the GS paper 3, understanding to the economic, which actually made a huge differences compared to the past. So this is about it. So this snapshot will be more than sufficient for you all to look on to. Just have a glance. Then comes with respect to page 12. This is again the coverage with respect to US military to have a space command. This is again a small coverage where the US President Mr. Donald Trump is ordered for the creation of a space command, and this is one of the new organizational structure within the Pentagon. So here they wanted to have a overall control of the military space operations. To have a control is what they have been come up with this particular space command, where the goal is mainly to build an entirely new branch of the military called the Space Force. So they wanted to have an approval from the Congress for the same. So this is actually where the establishments are consisting with United States law, and they wanted to have a proper unified combatant command. So that is one of the reasons to why the US President Donald Trump has actually ordered. If this kind of an issues of the space command is trying to be more of beneficial in its term to be as successful, then other countries also would be able to come up with the same. For exam perspective, it will not directly help us, but if at all we have to talk about any of the resolutions of the reforms, so this can actually come as in handy. So this is just a small information on the same. And here you have with respect to UK MP want the Sikhisms to be recognized as an ethnicity in the census. So this is actually the group of British MPs that have actually launched a year-long campaign to lobby for the Sikhism to be added as a separate ethnicity, that is a tick box in the next UK census, which is going to be held on 2021. So this after the country's statistical authority, which actually concluded that it was not required. So here there are certain group of people where they actually want with respect to having the tick box so that the Sikhs community can also be trapped under the UK census in 2021. So if they give or not, we need to understand whether or not to what has to be done. So whether they have been taken or not. If they don't do it, so this news would end up here itself. So this is just that the Sikhism should be recognized as an ethnicity in the census. So we have to wait and watch about this particular news items as well. Then comes with respect to page 12, which is talking on Afghan government sends the team for the peace talks with Taliban. So this is like the Afghan peace negotiation team has actually arrived in the Abu Dhabi. So this is with respect to a day after where the talks had actually been attended by US and the Taliban representatives, where they wanted to held in the city, which is aimed at ending the 17-year conflict. So there's a very long time conflict what has been there. And now the team has been in a proximity dialogue with the militants as they wanted to end the conflicts between the Afghan and also the Taliban. And much before, this is all about the basic informations to what you have to know. But apart from that, what you have to know is that with respect to the Moscow format. So this Moscow format was been there back in the news, let's say in the month of November. So this was like where the US, Pakistan, India and Afghanistan were part of this particular Moscow format. Again, this particular Moscow format was more confined to the Taliban's, where they actually considered to be as an Afghan government as an illegitimate, and therefore they opposed the Moscow format being so led by the Afghan government. So here the need for the Taliban would be like they wanted the Taliban to be controlled with respect to the major portions of the Afghanistan and thereby be considered as being a legitimate inclusion in the Afghan-led and Afghan-owned principles. Right. And secondly, it was the US which had actually led the forces and no times engaged with the Taliban on the local level during the post-war period in the Afghanistan as well. This was like again in the Moscow format to what it actually came up to be as a need of the Taliban. And there was also an initiative with respect to the quadrilateral coordination group. So this is between USA, China, Pakistan and Afghanistan. They actually launched in 2016. So that had actually failed to have a control over the growing of the Taliban. So this was something where the Moscow format is trying to it was being led by the Russia, and it's been criticized for not adhering the Afghan-led and Afghan-owned principle. So this is basically with respect to the Moscow format which was being held and the outcomes of the Moscow format. And what they have to do is with respect to the reason they should continue to have a commitment to the Moscow format. So even after having the Moscow format, now these people are been engaging to get peace talks with the Taliban as a crew is actually been there. And this is a 12-person team which is actually for the first announced in November by the President Ashraf Ghani, where he is part of the diplomatic effort to bring the Taliban to table for the peace talks and the government in Kabul as well. So here the Taliban has not confirmed any of the meeting, but any which ways there is a long-standing vow not to speak with the Afghanistan officials. So here the Abu Dhabi talks, which is actually releasing a message to the militants that here the preliminary talks with the USA State Department Special Envoy. So this is with the discussions which would be continued, and they also said that they would also held an extensive meeting with the officials from the Pakistan and the Saudi Arabia as well and the UAE, where they would be repeating the demands for the international forces to be withdrawn from the Afghanistan borders. That's the areas. So here now you should also know that the Saudi Arabia and the UAE is on also the Pakistan were the only 3 countries to have recognized the Taliban government during its 5-year rule from 1996 to 2001. So here the US did not confirm any of the direct meetings, so between the Khalizad and the Taliban in Abu Dhabi. So this is a confirmation to what the US had to give on the same. So this is to promote basically an intra-Afghan dialogue towards ending the conflict, but we need to check and see whether it's going to happen, or we need to still wait about the conflict, which is whether it's going to get continued or it's going to get ended up. So this is all about it. So again, this is a news coverage which was repeatedly there. So what I recommend you all to first go for the Moscow format in detail and understand the Moscow format. If you understand the Moscow format, you will understand the development of it. Otherwise, it becomes quite a difficult task for you all to understand about the Afghan government and also the teams which is being sent to have a peace talks with the Taliban. So just do your background homework first, understand more about the Moscow format, and then understand about it, right? Then comes with respect to the page 13. So here we have the RBI scales up the liquidity infusion. So this is the RBI. On Tuesday it said that it is actually decided where it wanted to increase with the liquidity infusion by 10,000 crore to 50,000 crore. So we also know that earlierly it was like 40,000 crore to what the RBI wanted to infuse with respect to open market operations, but now it has been increased to 50,000 crores. So because here the liquidity conditions was not being recovered, as it continued to be the same, the evolving liquidity conditions remained the same on laminate of it, this decision is being taken. So this is there, and this is again a very small coverage, and I would also like to inform you all that under page 13 there were a lot of minute newses which were present. So I have not taken all those minute newses, which was all a continuation of the news, so we have been skipped. But if you feel that I would really want to know to what it is, definitely you can make use of the newspapers, and you can ensure that you would also have a glance to those kinds of news which has been there in a smaller nature. So if you want, you can do it, but the people who have been regularly up with me with respect to the current affairs, you people need not be worried, that as we have already covered with the news items pretty well. So that is this. And secondly, it is with respect to the page 18, which talks on to the warming leads to water crisis in Himalayas. So this is a study which has been stating that the warming is actually leading to the water crisis. So here there is a climate changing which has actually been driving the glaciers in the Himalayas to melt more rapidly, and then to whatever the any point like 10,000 years last, and this would be with a supply of the shortage of the water, which would be a biggest threat of the country. Especially there would be a supply shortage for the parts of India, Pakistan and Nepal. So this is a warning to what the study has been given, and moreover the devastating impact can be seen in most of the vulnerable residents who have been put up in the Andes mountains and also the Tibetan plateau. So this is something there, and apart from that, by 2100 the best scenarios is that the half of the ice will get disappeared. So as the warming has been more, the water would start getting melted, and that melted leads to a flood water, and that flood water starts becoming and mixed up with the oceans. So ultimately the ice will start getting disappeared if the warming is continued in the same pace. So that obviously will lead for a supply shortage. And moreover, they also said that the water supply is being declined, but the demand is rising. Is rising because of the growing population, which means that if let's say we have one bottle of the water, that 10 people who are actually looking out for the water for drinking, which means that the supply of the water is actually declined, but the demand of the water has been increased, and that is purely because of the population to what is being seen. So which means that there is a deficient of almost for 9 people. This would not be a safer stance when the humanity they have to sustain for a longer time. So this becomes a problem. And apart from that, the glaciers in the Peru supply critically needed water for the people, for the crops and also for the livestock. So this is the glaciers in Peru also they wanted. And moreover, you should know about the international research team that dubbed the plateau to be called as a third pole, because it contains the largest stores of the fresh water in the world outside the north and the south pole. So third pole is nothing but there are two different poles, one is the north south poles, one is the north pole, another one is the south pole. Apart from that, there is a third pole which is the third largest store of the ice after the Antarctica and also the Greenland. So you can find it in Antarctica and Greenland to be as the biggest one. So this particular third pole is actually found in the region in Central Asia. So this third pole is giving the waters in a seasonal for the 10 largest rivers like Brahmaputra or Stangpot, whatever the rivers are, and it comprises the Himalayas, the Hindu Kush, and also the Tibetan Plateau. So all the three, basically we call it to be as an HKT. So HKT is nothing but with respect to Himalaya, then we have with respect to Hindu Kush and also the Tibetan Plateau. All the three put together is what we call it as a third pole, and this third pole is the third largest one of all time, and this one is now been melting very faster. On melting on most of it is now we have a danger that there would be a shortage of the supply of the water for the poor people in Britain. So this has to be taken into consideration, and they need to work at the time. If not, the water crisis would be more in Himalayas as well. So it starts addressing. So this is on that, and purely this is on your GS paper 3, which talks on the environment and also covers for your preliminary examination. So this is about it. So basically you should get to know about these things in detail. So that's it. So by this we have come to an end of the video. So these were the important articles for the day. We hope this particular video would have helped you all in your preparation, and work hard until you accomplish. Thank you and have a nice day.